Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. I'm your host, Aaron Quinn, joined by my, I would say, new co-host because you're here all the time now and I like it. Greg Tompsett. How are you today, my man?
Good evening, everybody. Looking forward to talking Bills Packers.
So how's this week been? Have you been, last time we talked, it was coming right off a fresh, big upset victory. We were savoring it. Are you still in savoring mode? Or are you fully moved into Green Bay?
I can't lie. I try to live by McDermott's 24-hour rule and move on, but I've gotten a lot of questions. I wear a fair amount of Bills gear when I'm out and around, so everybody's asking me, like, oh my gosh, how did they pull off that game? Or did you expect that? And, of course, I tell everyone no. I can't lie. I was hoping it wasn't embarrassing, and we ended up pulling off a fantastic game. So I've proud that what I have in the piece of me in the back of my mind, just more of those we're going to get. So extra this week.
Yeah, no, definitely. And they got another tough matchup, obviously, this week. The first one, we didn't think that there was any way they could pull it off. Obviously, this week, the line's a little bit lower. What do you got on the line going into this week right now?
It's interesting. It came out at 10.5 really quick, which is kind of high. We're going to get into some of the challenges that Green Bay's had, but it is in Green Bay. It is Josh Allen versus Aaron Rodgers. So 10.5 was a little bit out there. It pretty quickly moved down to 10 and moved down to 9.5. So there was some early money in Vegas pretty heavily on the Bills. I doubt it's going to move much more than that. They don't like to move lines more than a point or a point and a half. So I expect it to be there, but it was interesting to see that it moved as quickly as what it did. So usually that's in Vegas, they'll call that the sharp money. The sharp monies came in pretty quickly on the Bills. So that's a little bit reassuring to me, but it's still 9.5 points, and it's still, pretty understandably a big cushion for the Packers.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reason that it could be that. Like you said, we'll get into some of the more breaking down the players here. Before we get really into this matchup, I do want to remind everyone to head over to cover1.net. If this is your first time catching us, you happen to be here catching this live stream, cover1.net's got you covered for really all things Bills, all things breaking down draft prospects as well. It's not just Bills. So if you're just a football fan and you like good analysis and breakdowns, head over to cover1.net. We do have a phone app so you can get that on your Android or iOS device by going to the market, downloading that. The content comes right to you, so really can't beat that, guys. But right now, two pieces of Bills content that's up that I think everybody should take a look at is Fernando did his studs and duds from this past weekend, and then Eric did a all-22 Bills defense terrorized Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. I think that was a great thing to just go back and watch what the Bills defense was able to do against a really good offense. I know a lot of people said Vikings slept on the Bills or however you want to put it, but they really put it to them, regardless if they slept on them or not. And Eric breaks that down in a really good fashion for you. You'll learn something. That's the best thing about cover1.net for me. The reason that I tried to get involved was I was a football fan seeking the knowledge of the game, and the way Eric and the guys break down stuff, I learned something every single time they put out a piece. So head over to cover1.net, check all that out. And let's get right into this, man. So we got the 1-2 Bills. Played 6 bad quarters, like we said, and 6 phenomenal quarters versus the 1-1-1, which is just a ugly thing to look at, Packers. And that one win could easily have flopped the other way for the Packers. They are not a pretty, if you could have a pretty 1-1-1, they aren't a pretty 1-1-1. Definitely off to a slow start, struggling early. Overall, this Packers team, from what you've gotten to see and read and hear, what's going on in Green Bay right now?
I'm really guilty of it every football season. I get into Bills tunnel vision and I really get solely focused on there. And I have some fantasy things going or some gambling things going where I'll kind of catch up on things as we go. But I really hadn't had a ton with the Packers other than the Sunday Nighter to open things up. So, I looked at that. He was kind of fortunate. Khalil Mack dominated the first half. It looked like Rodgers was done for the year, comes riding in to save the day and had a Aaron Rodgers-esque comeback. So you just kind of assume, that's the way it is. So I go back and look and I rewatch the Vikings game, and man, there was a lot of lucky plays. They had a fumble recovery in the end zone, a lot of good field position that were 3 and outs, but they still got a field goal out of it. They were pretty fortunate to come away with a tie there. And then last week, I really didn't see this until well afterwards, Washington took it to them pretty well. And that there were some similarities to Bills Vikings as there were in Redskins Packers. The Redskins jumped out pretty quickly, kind of took the run game out of Green Bay's hands, and really got them in a hole where then you're depending on Aaron Rodgers, which normally is a good thing, but they just dropped 7-8 guys every single play and dared them to beat them over the top. So they're 1-1-1, which is weird. There are 4 teams in the NFL that are 1-1-1. That's just a weird thing. And they're probably lucky to be in that spot, to be honest.
Yeah, no doubt. I do follow the Packers a little bit closely. My brother's a Bears fan, my dad's a Packers fan, and my uncle's a Vikings fan. So I'm the only one really in our family that's outside of that NFC North. But I follow those teams pretty closely, especially my dad's team. And he has been very upset about this team this year. But every year they similar to New England in that they start slow. They really ramp up for the end of the year. They're a perennial playoff team. So that's a little bit natural for these perennial playoff teams to get off to a little bit of a slow start. But this 1-1-1 feels different than their traditional slow starts where they'll drop a game here or there. Because like you said, against the Bears, that should have been a loss. Really, I put that on the Bears for dropping that game versus the Packers winning that game. Obviously, Rodgers came back in and played phenomenally, but the Bears dropped a 20-point lead. Can't really have that against your division rival. The Minnesota game, a lot of breaks. You definitely need that in the NFL. I'm not going to take that away from them. Getting some lucky breaks helps get games won in the league. But yeah, last week was almost total domination by the Redskins. Adrian Peterson looked like the guy from 5 years ago, running all over them in the first half of that game. So definitely some issues in Green Bay that I don't know come from just that traditional slow start in September. I think there's actually some deep issues in that team, and the injuries I think are only compounding on that. Obviously, Rodgers playing on a gimpy leg. Still, that guy's got incredible toughness in him. Watching that Redskins game, he got beat up on. I think he got sacked 4 or 5 times maybe in that game, and he was still running for first downs, putting his body on the line, gimping out of bounds to get first downs. Really when nobody else around him was playing that well. So kudos to him, man, because that's a tough thing to do. But the injuries are starting to compound over there. What do we got? We got Devon House out this week, Mo Wilkerson out for the year. That's a big blow because they definitely brought him in to add to that rotation in the interior line. Looks like Nick Perry with a concussion, Balaga with a chronic back issue perhaps flaring up. Kevin King, their draft pick from a year ago, out. He can't seem to stay on the field. Justin McCray out, and then Jimmy Graham pops up on the did not participate list today. So you got any info on any of these injuries for the Packers?
There's a couple things that are interesting. So, we're hearing it sounds like Brian Balaga and Rodgers are in a similar spot, probably going to tough it out and go to play, but are not going to be 100%. I'm reading some Packers insiders that sound like they're looking at Justin McCray probably not to play, but he's not their strongest interior lineman to begin with. So probably not ideal to have him there, but still some challenges. The Nick Perry's interesting because he's in concussion protocol, and that is a very particular set of steps that you have to complete. And he wasn't one of those if he didn't want to go to the locker room guys. Like, he got hit and immediately went to the locker room by, himself saying, I got to go. This is not good. So that's interesting to see how that plays out. Like you said, Mo Wilkerson was a grisly injury and really a shame. A good player that had a pretty nasty, look like possible compound fracture in the ankle. So he's obviously done there, and that's a big hit to what was a really strong interior 3 lineman. A lot of people know Mike Daniels. He's really strong, but Kenny Clark's a really good nose tackle, and they had a strong interior 3. If it's possible that they lose Mo Wilkerson and Nick Perry, that is a huge shot to their front 7.
Yeah, no doubt. And I tend to think when I see guys in the concussion protocol, if it's a Bills player, I automatically assume that they're not going to be able to get in for the next game. If they do, then that's a pleasant surprise. The NFL and the teams take this very seriously of getting the guys through these steps of the concussion protocol, like you said. My opinion is that he's probably going to miss this week if he's not trending this way here in the next day or two. So, a big blow to them. Obviously, the Mo Wilkerson thing's a huge blow to them. But the Bills have their own issues on injuries. Obviously, Shady came out in his press conference today and said he's going to play. I'm sure the trainers didn't love him coming out and just saying that to everybody. I'm sure that he'll still be a game time decision when it comes down to it. I know he wants to get out there, but I'm guessing he'll be a game time decision still. Shaq Lawson, really no change for Shaq right now that I've heard of. Still not doing anything. Then we had some guys in the red no contact jerseys. We had Trent Murphy, who can't seem to stay out of that red no contact jersey this year. Marcus Murphy, who had a rib injury. And then there was somebody else. Who am I missing? Was that it?
I think that's there was a couple things. I know that there was some question on whether Phillip Gaines should be listed or not. I know McDermott said that he was fully good to go. So that's, I think, encouraging. But that was one that I expected to see on the report coming in this week.
Okay, yeah. And then Ryan Lewis had some type of injury, but we didn't see that in the practice this week. It seemed like he's fine and good to go. Obviously, they're going to need all the defensive backs that they can get. So if EJ Gaines, it sounds so weird to say because if you asked me 2 months ago if I was worried about EJ Gaines' health with this defense, but I think that would be a huge get to get him back into this. So a lot of injuries to play out here throughout the week. Definitely something Bills fans are going to want to watch with the Packers specifically because some big names on there that could really affect what they try to do on both sides of the ball. Let's get into
I'd say that we're probably slightly on the luckier side of that. I don't feel like we have a lot of major ones there. It sounds like Shaq might even have a shot to go, and the rest of ours are kind of recovering from some solid ones. So hopefully that's something in our favor.
Yeah, and somebody's saying here Charles Clay was a do not participate, but Clay has been that way on Wednesdays for 3-4 years now. I think that is just his he gets those treatments on that chronic knee issue, so I don't really even consider Clay when he's on the do not participate on a Wednesday. I think that's just a maintenance thing for a player with bad knees. But yeah, no, let's get right into this though, man, because there's a lot to talk about with the Packers because they are a little bit of a conundrum right now. I want to get into the offensive side of the ball because there's definitely some weapons. I don't know that it's the tier of weapons that the Bills defense played last week, but I think there might be more of them, a little bit more depth throughout the team. So we obviously got Aaron Rodgers. We could probably talk about the guy all day long. We got 6 touchdowns, hasn't thrown a pick, playing on one leg, 66 completion percentage, almost 300 yards a game. He's Aaron Rodgers. When he's going, he's the best quarterback in football, in my opinion.
Oh, I think it's undeniable. And the fact that it's funny, you hear some Packers fans who are actually almost relieved that he can't run around because when he's forced to stay in the pocket and just throw on rhythm, his arm is so ridiculous that it almost forces him to play within the routine of the offense. And you lose out on some of the crazy big rollout plays, but he's just so surgical with it that it's crazy. So yeah, I'm not all that hopeful that all of a sudden he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers.
No, and that's obviously the big thing about this game is trying to somewhat contain him. He's going to get he's going to do Aaron Rodgers things in this game. You hope to try to contain him. I don't think they're going to be able to get to him. Teams have gotten to him this year, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get to him and fluster him the way that they were able to do with Kirk Cousins. There isn't anything Aaron Rodgers hasn't seen in this league. Maybe the injury has him a little hesitant, but from what I saw that Redskins game, he was getting beat up and it didn't seem to impact him at all. And he was still he was rolling out and making throws that nobody else in the league can make, putting balls on a dime. So he's going to be a very difficult thing, especially for the Bills on the road. He loves playing in Lambeau to stop. But like I said, we could talk about Aaron Rodgers all day. More importantly is how did the Bills slow down the weapons that Aaron Rodgers has? And I think they have a nice wide receiver core with Devontae Adams, Geronimo Allison, and Randall Cobb. Cobb had a pretty bad game last week, though. And I think Packers fans, from what I'm hearing, are starting to get a little bit frustrated with Randall Cobb and that he's not producing the way he was a year or 2 years ago after they let Nelson go. They were hoping Cobb would step up a little bit, and he just has never been able to really step up into that role. He's really sitting established as the third receiver on that team.
Yeah, I think they had that situation for so many years where it was just an embarrassment of riches, and they had so many weapons that you just kind of had to pick your poison, and there was always someone open. When Devontae Adams is your third receiver, when you have Jordy Nelson, when they went through all the Donald Driver and all the other guys, Greg Jennings over the years. So now you bring in Jimmy Graham, you kind of see Devontae Adams as your number one, and you assume that they're going to just roll right with it. There's a younger guy they like, Geronimo Allison, who's got some potential, but they certainly saw Randall Cobb stepping right up there. So I think that some of the things we've seen with Jimmy Graham is still a great red zone target, but he's probably not the threat that he was 20 to 20 like he used to be in the middle of the field and down the seam. Randall Cobb still has some shiftiness. Obviously, you saw that crazy long play he broke at the end of the Bears game. So he's still got it there every once in a while, but it's not the suddenness and separation that he had when he was younger. I think very highly of Devontae Adams, but he's not your Julio Jones, AJ Green, big, strong, super fast number one receiver. He's just a really good receiver. And I think a lot of guys would look good with Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know that they have one guy that really terrifies me, or I'll say this, I don't think they have anyone that Tre'Davious White can't handle. So I feel pretty good that they're going to be able to lock down one of them. And then the same fear I had last week, can we rig something together to protect Ryan Lewis or Phillip Gaines or whoever it is against Randall Cobb, Geronimo Allison, and not leave them out on an island?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I would expect to see Tre'Davious White shadowing Adams throughout the day, just because he is their number one receiver. And like you said, he doesn't have any phenomenal physical traits. He does run really good routes. He finds holes in zones, and that's really what you need to be for Aaron Rodgers. And the other thing that both him and Allison and Cobb really do is the scramble drill really well. When the play breaks down and Rodgers out of the pocket, they know, hey, I got to get open because this guy's not letting this play die. So that puts a lot of pressure on defensive backs, especially young defensive backs. Again, I'm not worried about Trey, but when you start getting Aaron Rodgers out of the pocket, I know Green Bay fans prefer him to stay in the pocket. My fear is when he starts to break out of the pocket and you're putting that stress on young cornerbacks to cover for 3 to 5 seconds versus the 2 seconds that we were getting against the Vikings. That puts a lot of stress on guys like Taron Johnson, Ryan Lewis, and EJ Gaines, or Phillip Gaines, to all the Gaineses, to cover these guys downfield. And these guys are good at finding the soft spots in the defense. And Aaron Rodgers is going to find them if they come open even a little bit. He's going to find them. He's going to put the ball with accuracy. So that's kind of where my fear is with this receiving core. I think if it's just straight up base D, the Bills are going to keep everything in front of them.
Yeah, obviously that's going to be their plan. In my mind, that's what the McDermott-Frazier system does. It's going to be, have good coverage, get pressure with your front four, keep the guys in front of them, make the tackle. I think that's going to be critical here. Obviously, we're pushing to get Rodgers off his spot. We need to be able to get him uncomfortable. I think that he obviously showed he can roll out and move. I don't think he wants to be doing it every play. So having some pressure from Starr, Harry, and Kyle is going to be huge, being able to get some pressure right up in his face. And then obviously we see what Jerry Hughes is capable of. So we're going to need that on a regular basis here. So hopefully they're able to kind of shake that up. I know we got into some of their weapons, but they actually have an interesting 3-headed backfield that are very, like, each kind of play their role. Jamal Williams is kind of a tough, hard-nosed runner. Ty Montgomery is a converted receiver who obviously has all the skills that go there. And Aaron Jones, I actually think, is the most talented between the three and is probably a good mix of both and capable of being an every down back. So I think ideally they want to be able to take that pressure off of Rodgers. They want to play from out in front. They want to get that running game going. They fell in a hole last week. They've run into that before. So I think that it's going to be huge which team jumps out to the first score and gets the first lead. I think that's going to play a huge factor because if they have a chance to get those 3 running backs going, I think that's in their favor.
Yeah, definitely. And we talk about the running backs. I actually like Ty Montgomery a lot. I'm not going to ever come out and say should be a feature back in any system, but that versatility seems like a McDermott type of guy, that ability to line up really wherever on the field. And he plays hard. He runs hard. Again, he's not going to be the number one guy in any situation, but when you have Aaron Jones and Montgomery, and then you kind of are spelling them with Williams, that can be tough on a defense. I do think that their interior line, which we'll get into, is going to have a tough day really pushing the Bills back and creating some holes for those guys. And that's what I think we saw in Washington. They couldn't really get the running game going there. Obviously, they fell down a little early, but they still tried to go back to the run and just couldn't get anything going. So definitely got to limit those guys. I do want to touch on real quick. We touched on Jimmy Graham a little bit. He was a big free agent acquisition for this team after they lost Bennett. And people thought that this was going to be, they've been searching for that tight end to really open up the game for Aaron Rodgers for years now. And they haven't really been able to get anybody to step into that role that guys like Tom Brady have had. And so they bring in Jimmy Graham. And so far, we haven't seen it. I think I agree with you. I don't think he's the guy that is that midfield guy. I think he's the red zone threat guy. They also brought in Lance Kendricks, a guy that really hasn't done anything with Green Bay yet. So should Bills fans be worried about either of these guys, or are safeties and linebackers good enough to kind of negate what they're going to try to do there?
I'm going to say 20-20, I feel really good about it. I think that, people have this picture in their mind of the New Orleans Saints, Jimmy Graham, who was burning guys down the seam and making acrobatic catches, as that basketball player. It's easy to forget he didn't play he didn't play football. So he had a window where he was learning how to play before he really got started. He's 31, about to turn 32. He's still 6'7", 265. You can't coach that. But you're not talking about the same kind of athlete that he was 5, 6, 7 years ago. Once Havana's talking about
a couple knee injuries too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Havana had mentioned here the biggest threat, and where I'm the most concerned is looking in the red zone, because I think out in the open field, Poyer and Hyde, it doesn't matter as much. But when you get down in the red zone, they're not the biggest safeties. Do you go the big nickel with Raphael Bush? Do you try Tremaine Edmonds or Matt Milano for size and hope? But once you get down in there, 6'7", 265, the basketball background, being able to box out, he's still always going to be a threat. And in my mind, by far, their number one threat in the red zone. So I'm not all that concerned moving the chains down the field. But once you get in the red zone, he's my number one, especially assuming that you can lock down Devontae Adams with Trey.
Yeah, and especially with Aaron Rodgers' ability to put the ball anywhere. He can put it where a guy like Graham can only get it, right? If he's got to put it where Micah Hyde or Poyer can't get it, like you said, he will put it there. So I think the most interesting part about this matchup, especially after last week and the way Jerry Hughes is playing and the way this defensive line has picked it up over the last 6 quarters here, getting pressure, still being able to maintain their guys in the back, is this offensive line. Like we mentioned at the opening of this, they've got some injuries along the line. Brian Bulaga, who's been really a cornerstone of their offensive line for years, is dealing with a back issue. If anyone's hurt their back, I'm becoming an old man these days. And I know when I hurt my back, that doesn't just go away, right? That is an issue that lingers. Offensive linemen, when you're trying to create leverage, you need your whole base and your back. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. It looks like he is going to play, but definitely something to keep an eye on. I do think his production is diminishing a little bit at this point in his career. He's not that old, but I think he's starting to wear down a little bit right now. I'm going to butcher his name. But their other tackle,
David Bakhtiari.
Yeah,
Bakhtiari. He's their best lineman. He's their best lineman.
He is super consistent, and that is going to be a really interesting matchup between him and Hughes. What did you see when you were watching that? Because he seems to be the only guy that's keeping any protection for Rodgers right now.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of people say, I don't know, that you have your Tyron Smiths, you have your Trent Williams. Many people think he's the best pass blocking left tackle in the league. I think there's an argument to be made there. As a left tackle, I think that there's a lot of matchups we're going to see there with Trent Murphy. I think that that's a significant advantage for the Packers. Our best bet for Brian Bulaga's back is that he's got to deal with the bend of Jerry Hughes.
Yeah.
So in my mind, the way that they ran that this past week, Jerry was commenting on loving teams who have good right tackles because then they're more confident to try to leave them out there on an island. I think that's a huge one for us. But I would assume, short of getting some nice, some motion, getting some different stunts and movements between the tackle and the end, Bakhtiari is probably to their benefit.
Yeah, and I would assume that the Packers know Balaga and his condition enough to not leave him out on an island after what they saw last week. I would expect Jerry Hughes. Leslie Frazier said there isn't a lot of times where Jerry Hughes is getting one-on-ones, right? That was a rare occasion last week, and then he put it on tape. I do not believe that they're going to not chip him all game or throw some help his way and then force the other defensive lineman to really do something. But with that said, Justin McCray looking like he might be out as well. I don't even know who they're planning on starting. I forget the name of the guy. It's a guy that I haven't heard of before, but that doesn't mean he's not good. I think it was Byron Bell.
It is Byron Bell. It's a guy that was not on their opening day roster and has been picked up since then. So it would be similar to us starting the new guy we just picked up in this past week. So I mean, it's probably I've heard Byron Bell's name. He was a prospect at one point and reasonably well thought of, but I'm sure not their ideal strategy.
Yeah, and again, a guy that I know Green Bay fans were so excited about, Corey Linsley, hasn't really developed into the center that they thought he was going to be. I think he's solid. Center play, maybe better than right now what the Bills have at center. But nothing really stands out on that offensive line outside of their left tackle that gives me any cause for concern that they're going to come in and dominate the Bills' defensive line.
No, I feel like interior line, we have a marked advantage. Corey Linsley and Lane Taylor were both reasonably well thought of prospects. Neither have lived up to the investment that were made in them. They're both starting caliber guys, I guess, on the lower end in the same way that Bodine is a starting caliber guy per se. I would think that's a fairly similar level of play, but I think that Starr, Kyle, and Harrison Phillips versus any combination of Taylor, Linsley, and Bell is a significant advantage for us. And as I mentioned earlier, I think that's even more critical because then you're talking about pressure right up in Rodgers' face. He's not as mobile as he traditionally is, getting him off his spot. There were plays last week that we never saw from him. He had some rollouts where he one-hopped it in. I think he's arguably the best passer in NFL history on the move. He's made some unbelievable off-platform throws, and you can tell he does not have the same base that he had. So getting pressure up the middle and internally is going to be critical for us.
Yeah, you say off platform, and all the times that I've watched Aaron Rodgers, I don't even know if he has a platform, even with a clean pocket. That guy throws some crazy balls. So, but no, I definitely agree with you there. I want to flip it over to the other side of the ball. I really love Mike Pettin. When the Bills lost Pettin to the Browns, I was very disappointed. I wanted to see him get a couple of years here and really install that defense. He's a film junkie. He is a mastermind, almost to a detriment to himself sometimes, of over hiding and disguising and bringing out things. And that's tough when you're playing against your top tier quarterbacks. But my biggest concern, I think, of this whole game is Mike Pettin versus not Dable, but Mike Pettin versus Josh Allen. And the stuff that he's going to throw, these looks that he's going to throw at Josh Allen with this defense full of young, raw, but very athletic guys. And he's going to be able to disguise some things that Allen hasn't seen this far in his career. We know Pettin pretty well, having had him here. What are your thoughts on that matchup with Pettin and Allen?
I can't lie. I'm scared. I think that Pettin has a really creative mind. I think that he's going to do a lot of things, especially in coverage, in the 3-4 alignment and setup. He's going to play with Allen's eyes. He's going to play with what he assumes they're lining up in and where it's coming back. I think you hit on the head exactly. We need to hope maybe he goes a little too far. Maybe he gets a little too excited and exotic in what he does. I think that we're going to see a very similar lineup and strategy to what Dable and Allen put together last week, that it's going to be quick decisions, getting the ball out fast, and that is predicated on knowing where to go and where your reads are. So in my mind, the Dable versus Pettin head-to-head is the key to the game. I think that we're going to have a lot of opportunities to move the ball on, we'll get into it, but a fairly dinged up defense. But there's a lot of scheme potential that Pettin can bring to the table to play with. You know, I know we're all excited, but a rookie that's still going into his third start.
No, absolutely. And I wanted to start when I'm talking about this defense, I want to start from the back and work my way forward, because I really think that the athleticism that they've created in really a short amount of time in Green Bay, and I think it starts with Clinton-Dix, a guy that I've been fortunate enough to watch a lot of film on lately. I'm taking the Scouting Academy course, and he's the first guy that's popped up on my player module for that. So this whole week,
and he has a fantastic name.
I love his name, but the range of this guy, and that was the first thing I thought of when I thought of Josh Allen and what Mike Pettin's going to do, because I'm watching old tape. I'm not watching Mike Pettin, Clinton-Dix. So what Mike Pettin is going to be able to do with this guy and lining him up really anywhere on the field to confuse Josh Allen, he's going to be able to make up wherever he's lined up and get back into position because of his just sheer athleticism and range. And that is a very challenging thing for a rookie, because Dable's teaching him to read these safeties, right? So if your safety's showing you one thing, but he can get back in a split second to wherever he has to be, that's going to really confuse a rookie quarterback. What are your thoughts there? Have you seen much of Dix since he's come into the league?
A huge fan. And I think, honestly, look at what we saw 2 weeks ago with Derwin James. When you have a versatile athlete at safety, it gives you so much opportunity and potential. And obviously, look at us. I think that, Poyer and Hyde aren't your prototypical Steve Atwater guys that are going to go lay the lumber. They're athletes, and they can disguise things. They're comfortable coming up, looking like an A-gap blitz and still covering the deep third. I think that's absolutely what we're going to see from Clinton-Dix, and he has that athleticism and the instincts, and a aggressive, creative coordinator who's going to put him in those positions. And I think that it's a matchup that we need to be, worried about to make sure that Allen can have those reads, because the quick decisions and quick outs. I know both Khalid and Havana were talking in the comments here about the need to have that quick game. That only works if you make the right decision quickly. If they're tricking us and tricking his eyes, all turn into quick interceptions. So we want to make sure that he's reading that correctly.
Absolutely. And so then you move over to the other defensive backs on this team. And this past draft, they get Alexander and Josh Jackson, two guys that I really liked in this draft process. I was surprised they went with both of them just because there was a lot of other holes to fill, but they really needed some help in the PD. And Alexander, I haven't seen a lot of him this year, but he is an athletic freak. He's a guy that, again, is going to allow – Mike Penn could easily come out with 5-6 DBs anytime he wants and split somebody and send people back. He's going to do stuff like that. And I think that the athleticism those guys give you and the youth they give you, and then you add Tramon Williams, who's just a solid defensive back. He's been solid for years, doesn't do anything extraordinary, but he's just a solid guy. He's seen almost everything. Kevin King right now injured, but he has the potential to be good. We haven't seen it yet, but he has the size and the athleticism as far as the height that you'd like to see. And then they bring in Breeland the other day. I don't know if Breeland's going to see the field this week, but he very well could.
Yeah, I think that he's a veteran. He's a smart player. I don't know if there's any history between him and Mike Pettin that you're going to have familiarity with the system. I don't believe so. So my hope is that he needs this week to get up to speed. And then because obviously we've talked about in many of our discussions, communication is critical in the secondary. So bringing somebody in on 3 days notice, I think, is a tough call. I can't lie. Their cornerback depth chart is my wish list for the past two drafts. I love Jair Alexander. I love Josh Jackson. I love Kevin King. They have the size and athleticism that I think you need in today's NFL, and especially in the kind of aggressive defense that they're running. I really love what they've put together there. Now, I think what we have going for us is they're also very young. Clinton-Dix is young. King's only in his second year. Jackson and Alexander are both as rookies. Tramon Williams is a veteran and solid, but also maybe at the other end of his career. So we're looking at a pretty big swing there. Somebody who's 35, and then a couple 22 and 23-year-olds. So I do like where their secondary is looking like it's going to go. I don't know that it's quite there yet and what its potential is looking at, but in 2 to 3 years, I think they may have one of the best secondaries in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I like, each of them for their own traits. Like I love Jackson's ball skills. He might not be as athletic as Alexander and King are, but he has a knack for getting the ball. So they have just a nice group as a whole. The thing that they've got going for them where they don't really have to play Breland is they have more defensive backs that are at least good enough to play than I think the Bills have wide receivers that they're going to ever throw out at any given time because they just don't have the talent at the wide receiver position. So I think that they're fine there. I think that is going to be a difficult thing for the Bills players who the Bills don't have a lot of athleticism at the wide receiver position outside of Ray McLeod really is probably our most athletic wide receiver. And he's a late round rookie. So I think at least athletically, I don't like that matchup for the Bills. Kelvin Benjamin's really got to step up in this game and use his veteran instincts and leadership, if there is any, to work his size against some of these more athletic guys and maybe get them to bite on some stuff and find ways to get open. If he doesn't, I don't know who's going to really get open against these guys. I haven't really seen Zay create any separation. Charles Clay isn't really a big separation guy, no matter who's covering him. So that matchup concerns me a little bit. One guy I want to talk about, we're going to move into the linebackers. Actually, there's two guys really there right now. Blake Martinez is a guy I don't think that gets talked about enough outside of Green Bay. Talk about just an overall very good player. He's become a very good player right there for Green Bay. What have you seen from him?
Really smart player out of Stanford, someone who I think is really solidified. You, as we talked about, I think Nick Perry and obviously Clay Matthews are going to get a lot more attention. But I think Blake Martinez is kind of the bread and butter of their defense. He's their guy. You're seeing 8, 9, 10 tackles every single week. He's there. He's probably not going to have the flash, big turnover plays, a lot of sacks and things like that. I actually kind of align him, similar to guys we've seen in the past in that middle linebacker role. So, just some opportunities, not a huge athlete, not that big, only 237 pounds, but somebody who's a very steady, intelligent player that helps kind of quarterback their defense.
Yeah. And like Khalid says, Martinez is good, but he's rather slow. But I do think that like you said, we've seen linebackers here in Buffalo like that maybe what he lacks in athleticism, he makes up for in his ability to process the play, understand where he's supposed to be. You don't always have to be the most athletic guy if you know where you're supposed to be and know what you're supposed to do, and you limit the mistakes that you make. Because we've also seen the other end of it where you have an athletic freak who has poor mental processing, doesn't ever know where to be, overshoots gaps, things like that. And that's almost worse to me than being a step or two slow, but knowing exactly where you're supposed to be. And I think that's what I see most out of Martinez is he's rarely out of position. He's always got his nose around the ball. And so you can lose a step or two if you've got that. But then they do have an athletic freak, I think, at linebacker, a guy that I loved in the draft process. I'm not sure that I thought he was ready to start in the NFL in 1 year. I really wanted the Bills to take a look at him just with some of the needs that they had at linebacker is Oren Burks. I don't know if you've seen anything out of him in the draft process, but he was a guy that I was really big on, and he got thrown right into the fire here in Green Bay, and he's getting a ton of reps. What are your thoughts there?
Wasn't he one of those spark score maniacs? I think he had one of the crazy Nike spark scores that
he was a converted I think safety, cornerback, safety, and then to linebacker. So he played all defensive back positions in college and then moved to linebacker his last 2 years. So he's got that athleticism.
Yeah, I'm honestly not far off of what we're trying to do with Matt Milano, and being able to, build that new DN Jones, 2018 NFL linebacker. That's what you want there. I was drawing a blank on Preston Brown's name earlier, but that's a lot what Martinez reminds me of. Kind of in the right spot, but also making a lot of tackles 5-6 yards down the field. I think that, Perry is a lot bigger. So I think against the run, that's probably more beneficial for them. But if he is still dealing with a concussion protocol, and obviously I would hope that they take that seriously, if he's still in that, I think that Burks maybe brings a little bit more in the passing game and in that coverage game, and probably from a blitzing and pressure standpoint, we'll have to see. Maybe that gives us incentive to want to pound the ball and run a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think going back to what we're talking about with Patton, I think a guy like that has the historical coverage abilities, and obviously he's still a rookie, so he's limited in how much they're going to trust him. But in my mind, I see Patton bringing down Dix and blitzing Dix and Clinton Dix and then dropping Burks back and stuff like that. Josh Allen just hasn't quite seen yet of who's going to be where, and that type of athleticism allows you to do that. And I don't think that Nick Perry has that, so I think that he limits Pettin in some of those ways, but like you said, a little bit better of a run defender, things like that, a little bit more solid veteran presence for them. So a big loss if he can't go into the game. I think by far, we talked about how much I like the defensive backs, but you talked about a little bit at the top of the show here. Their best part of their team, maybe as a whole team, is I think Kenny Clark and Mike Daniels. Obviously, Mo Wilkerson being out is a big part of what they were trying to do in that rotation, but Kenny Clark is a beast of a man, and he's put up good production. And Mike Daniels can really line up anywhere on the defensive line, and he never really know where he's going to be, and he can just put in work on any offensive lineman. I think that the Bills have. That scares me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is something we need to be, really careful with. Kenny Clark is, just a physical freak, somebody who's 314 pounds and moves the way that he does and gets off the ball the way that he does, just so disruptive. And I really think the three of them that they had really presented problems in the same way. I actually like the fact that we're one of the least blitzing teams in the NFL, because I think that with today's passing game, you have to be able to get pressure with four guys, and the key is not knowing which four are going to be coming. I think that they had that in spades, having Mike Daniels, Kenny Clark, Mo Wilkerson moving around, and then not sure who else is coming out of the linebackers to be that fourth guy. And Pettin obviously gets a little more exotic and aggressive than that. That really gave them a lot. So I think it's a little bit of a notch for us that Wilkerson is out, but that's just because he's probably the name that people are familiar with the most. We shouldn't see that as a positive. Kenny Clark and Mike Daniels against John Miller, Russell Bodine, and Vlad Dukas is a problem. I mean, that's certainly going to be an issue. There is going to be more than one occasion where we run into problems, and Josh Allen probably takes a hit or two simply because of those two are not going to be able to be handled consistently by our interior line.
No, absolutely. And I think the plays that the Vikings had the most success was interior pressure last week against Josh Allen. And it's going to happen all year long. The Bills just aren't strong along the interior line. I really don't care what the PFF grades say. The offensive line has played better, I think, than a lot of us expected, but they still have a lot of flaws. I don't know that they're able to protect against the elite, which I do consider both Clark and Daniels elite interior defenders. And I think that's going to be a problem all day long. I think that's going to struggle to get them to get the run game going. But it might benefit Shady if Shady's healthy, because he can get along on the outside a little bit better. So I don't think there's going to be much up the middle all day, and I think there's going to be a lot of pressure coming to Josh Allen right in front of his face. Luckily, he's a big, tall man that looks great in shorts, and hopefully he can throw over them. But it's going to be a long day, I think, for the interior line dealing with those guys, and hopefully they tire out a little bit, and the rotation's not as deep as it has been, and maybe that favors the Bills a little bit. But as far as the starters go, I don't like that matchup one bit. Obviously, we talked about Nick Perry's injury and the concussion protocol, so at this point, I'm not expecting to see him. Clay Matthews is a guy that you've seen in all the commercials. He's got the hair, he's got the look. He's been an explosive player throughout his career. What I'm seeing on tape, obviously, he doesn't have the stats because some of his sacks have been taken back. That's been the big, high talked about thing over the past 2 weeks in the NFL's but he still has the ability to get in the backfield and make those sacks. But outside of that, man, I'm not seeing a lot of Clay Matthews. I think that if you ask Packers fans, I think they're starting to see the decline of the player that he used to be.
Yeah, I mean, he was drafted in 2009, so you were in his 10th season. He's had a lot of run. I think he's someone that, obviously, like you said, he's had a lot of attention and kind of been the poster child for the new quarterback contact penalties, but he couldn't be that poster child if he wasn't hitting the quarterback. So he still has the ability to get there. And I would say that's probably what we should expect. I don't expect 60 snaps of dominant defensive football. I expect probably not really hearing from him for long stretches. And then all of a sudden, 3rd and long, we're going to see that hair waving as he
hanging off at Josh Allen.
Yeah, as he goes around the corner. So, I think it's probably silly to assume that he's going to not have any impact, but he's not a Jerry Hughes type player to me where we're talking about 20 pressures through 3 games. I think that he's going to have his 1 or 2 or 3 flash plays. And other than that, is someone that I feel like has lost enough of a step in these 10 seasons that we can probably manage him for the most part.
No, definitely. I agree with that. So we've really run down through the roster as a whole here in Green Bay. I think coming into the season, people just automatically assume Green Bay is a Super Bowl contender just because they got Aaron Rodgers. They have enough weapons where you think they are. I don't even know in their division. I think they're going to have some tough struggle to get out of that division. There's a lot of talent in the NFC North right now, even though the records don't always indicate that. But I think that's a very tough division. There's going to be a lot of getting beat up throughout that division. I think all Bills fans, when they saw the schedule come out, saw this game, chalked it up as a loss. We've talked about these first 4 or 5 weeks of the NFL season just being totally unfair to a not super talented Bills roster. But tell me if I'm talking a little bit crazy here. After last week, in the last 6 quarters, I think the worst part about it is that they're going into Lambeau Field, which is a tough place to play, and the Packers traditionally play well in Lambeau. But I think outside of that, roster for roster, I don't think that the Bills are that far off from this team, and I think that they can come in and have a competitive game. I'm not saying the Bills are going to come in and do what they did to the Vikings, but can the Bills be competitive in this game?
I'll use gambling as my analogy. I almost never bet on the Bills because I can never separate my heart from my brain. But I will say, everything in me in my 37 years of watching and studying football screams to me that 9.5, 10 points is way too much. That these are not 2 rosters that are 10 points difference. So now, is it possible? I think it's very likely that I want to say the game's decided in the first 5 to 6 minutes. It's crazy, but I really think we saw what happened with Los Angeles. We saw what happened with Baltimore. Honestly, I don't know what would have happened if we didn't get that roughing the passer and all of a sudden it was a 3 and out and we gave the ball right back to Minnesota and they had some confidence. I think if we jump out and score early and take a lead, I feel like we are in that game absolutely to the very last minute. I feel like if they get rolling, hit a couple get a lead and then we could be in for a long day and it could be tough. So I think it's critical we get things off to a fast start. We get things going. And my gut says that this is a very close game. If you're asking me, who's going to win, Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau Field or Josh Allen, I can't with a straight face say that, oh, yeah, Josh Allen's going to roll in 2 weeks in a row and upset the Vikings and the Packers on the road. That's realistically not going to happen. But I do feel like it's a more competitive and a closer game than what that initial 10.5 points are. And honestly, I think that the sharp bettors in Vegas showed that, and that line immediately came down to 10 and immediately went down to 9.5. And it's actually got some pretty good odds now at 9.5. It's possible it could go to 9. So I think that that's showing it's a more competitive game than what that initial sticker shock number was. But I don't know that I'm ready to, predict a victory either.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of where I'm at. I think that it has the potential to be a nice competitive game for the Bills. Like you said, I don't think that they're a team that can overcome a deficit, which is going to be tough for them all season long. But if they can come out and play fast, that really plays to their strength as a defense of keeping the game in front of you, trying to force some turnovers. I think that's really their bread and butter. I guess my biggest concern right now is Bills got a lot of – this happens all the time, I feel like, every year. And this might just be the fan in me talking, but anytime the Bills – build back a little bit of the trust, whether it's of the media or the fans or anything like that, they come out and so like Josh Allen's getting a little bit of praise for some of the things that he did last week, and then he will come out and just vomit all over himself while everybody's saying like these guys are great or they're trending up, and then you see that. I think maybe just the years of abuse that I've taken as a Bills fan has that fear just lingering behind me, even though when I'm looking at this roster and I'm watching Green Bay Packers, that when I'm watching, I'm saying we can beat these guys. I really think that they can beat these guys. But then I have that fear as a fan that they're just going to come up and throw up all over themselves because I feel like they can beat them. Is that fair? Or do you have that as a fan?
Yeah, all the time, all the time. I think that I constantly have that inferiority complex that comes with the small market and the constant lack of respect that goes with being a Bills fan. So I want for them to play well, to just shut people up as much as I want it for my enjoyment. So I think it's frustrating sometimes that I put that much into it, and that's okay. That's me seeing that, hey, this is not the worst team in NFL history. That's crazy. There's talent on this roster. It's not going to be like that all year. This is a really rough start. But getting to the point to where, we want them to do well to prove that they're capable of it, it's probably half as much of that as anything, just wanting to show that, no, we really do have talent here. We have something going. We have pieces that make sense long-term. And, then of course we have Phillip Gaines too. And we have things that are holes that are not long-term strategic fits for what we're going to do. But, I do feel like we have a team that, if they get in the right situation, can do it. And you touched on it earlier. We don't have receivers that can separate and get themselves open. We don't have crazy mismatch playmakers at a lot of spots. So our entire season, in my mind, is going to be, what can Brian Daboll scheme for us? And I think that's what that comes down to this week. We touched on a lot of really impressive athletes on the Packers defense. We touched on a lot of really impressive prospects that were kind of on our wish list. I don't know that other than Tramon Williams, they have a lot of guys that I'm afraid of figuring out Daboll's scheme. So I think our best bet is that Daboll can scheme them open, can have some of that movement. That Jason Kroom touchdown wasn't Kroom shaking and baking anybody. They lost track of him because the play setup was fantastic. Right. So we're going to need those kind of plays to make that happen this week and every week going forward.
All right, so if I got to put you on the spot here before we sign off, what is your prediction for this game?
My prediction for this game is going to be Packers 27, Bills 21. I think that they hang in, and I think that we even see a lead early on. I think that we're right there hanging with them, and that eventually Devontae Adams, they get him lined up opposite away from Trey, and he shakes loose, or Jimmy Graham catches something down in the red zone, and that they end up pulling away, maybe scoring the final 10 points of the game and end up pulling away with a close victory. But I do think the Bills cover.
Awesome. I also think they do, but I have it pretty close to you. I think it's a 21-17 type of game. And I don't know. I think, like you said, I think the Bills do score early. I don't know that they're going to be able to just talent-wise sustain throughout another entire 4 quarters. If they do, though, here real quick before we get out of here, not to put the cart before the horse here, but if they can come out and sustain for another 4 quarters, you and I have said it here on air. I've talked about it a lot on Twitter. I think this is a 4-win team, 4 to 6-win team. But if they pick up 2 right out of the gates, I think that changes a lot of things and a lot of expectations for fans. So how big is this game for the coaching staff and the Bills to really try to ride that wave of the upset and try to get something going this year? Because they want to win. I don't think they're in it for the tank. That just isn't in their DNA and their makeup. Maybe the roster is built for a tank, but I don't think that the coaching staff wants that. So they're going to try to get this team into some type of rhythm and winning. How big is this game here? Is this like a season impacting type of changing game, or is this just chalking it up to they're playing a better team, they're probably going to lose?
It sounds silly. It sounds like being a huge homer, but it absolutely is. After the first 2 weeks, this would have been really easy to go in the tank. This would have been really easy to just kind of ride it out and, go through the motions. They didn't do that. They sucked it up. They had that bunker mentality. They played with an enormous chip on their shoulder. You saw every single guy screaming in the locker room. I love Trey with the, you like that? You like that?
And Hyde.
I love that mentality.
Hyde looking right at the reporters and saying, like, it's only week 3. You counted us out. Like, I love that.
Oh, yeah. And so I love that they rally around that. And I do think, it's, again, they're 9.5 point underdogs for a reason. They're not expected to win. If they somehow pulled this out and went to 2-2 after 3 road games in their first 4 heavy favorites, probably 4 of the 5 or 6 largest lines they're going to face as an underdog all season, short of some injury or something dramatic changing the rest of the year. These are 4 of the biggest favorites they're going to play all year from a Vegas standpoint. Getting that out of the way and surviving that at 2-2, where now you get into the Titans, the Dolphins, the Jets, some of the other portions of our schedule here that are a lot more competitive 50-50 games. Then we're going to get into that rhythm of, hey, maybe the ball bounces our way. Maybe we start to get some turnover luck. Maybe we start to see some things that way that it's, again, this is crazy.
You hate to get there, but I think we're thinking about it.
It's not crazy. If they somehow pulled this off, they would be in a position where they are talking about serious competition this year. And I think that, you can ask anyone probably in our chat, the Dolphins aren't a 3-0 team, but they played the nice part of our schedule that's coming up. I look forward to the Dolphins playing the Packers and the Ravens and the Chargers and the Vikings and start to hit that stretch of their schedule. I think that we're in a position where that is, something that we're going to have coming, and we're going to have some of those nice winnable games.
Yeah, and that goes back to my concern about them coming out and throwing up all over themselves, because I do think this is a bigger game than maybe it's being talked about as far as the totality of the season and what a win here can mean for the Bills that have such low expectations, especially after the first 2 games. What a win here could mean. Yeah, you end the quarter of the season at 2-2. That could be a huge benefit, because I think almost everyone thought they'd be 0-4 heading into out of the first quarter of the season. So if you pick up the 2 house money wins and then you could stack a little bit off of that, I think it's huge. And I think that the coaching staff is really drilling that into these guys, how important that is. You saw the video come out today of Coach McDermott. Ray McLeod was kind of playing around and didn't put in a catch, and McDermott was on him and saying that is not how we practice here. You got to bring it to practice. And I think he understands the importance of the game, and can he rally these guys to understand that and come out and put up a show. But I think still both, if you're just catching into this now, both Greg and I do still have some realization we're not just total homers. We both did pick the Packers to win this game, so don't get on us for being total homers on the Twitterverse. Speaking of Twitterverse, man, Greg, where can the people who love this show go find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. I'm always out there retweeting good messages, trying to go interact. I love to follow back Bills fans, so would love.
Oh, I lost you there for a second. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. We good? Yeah. Again, the handle's at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. Love to follow back Bills fans and connect with everybody that's out there.
Awesome. And you can find me, if you don't know, at Aaron Quinn 716. Make sure you get over at cover1.net. Like I said earlier, tons of great articles coming up there. You can find our podcast on there every time that we go live. We pop it out over there and put it up. Head over to the YouTube channel. There's over 750 videos or something like that by now. Eric is always putting out videos of breaking down specific plays or breaking down the defense, breaking down things of every game, getting you ready for the next game. So if you're a football fan looking to learn a little bit more about the X's and O's, we've got that covered over at the YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe. While you're doing that, there's a little bell right next to the subscribe. Click that. That will notify you whenever we go live, so you don't have to just get the notifications on Twitter whenever we do these live shows. We do the live shows every Wednesday, like you're seeing right now. We try to bring in somebody to get ready for the matchup for the week. And then you'll see Greg and I at the post-game show, which is always a great show, win or lose. We come on right after the 4 o'clock games, and we do a post-game show breaking down everything for the game. So we got you covered on the pregame, getting you ready for the game, and then the post-game show every single week. So make sure that you click that notifications bell, because it'll send a direct link right to your phone or email whenever we go live, so you can jump in the chat like everybody here is now. Also, head over to iTunes, wherever you guys get your podcasts, and subscribe over there. Leave us a review, guys, because it really helps us to keep this going, keep everything going. And we can't do it without you, the fans. So everybody that came out tonight, we really appreciate you. And let's hope for a nice game, a nice competitive game for the Bills this week and head into Lambeau. Thanks a lot, guys, and we'll catch you on the post-game show.